The Isle's balance changes are about as consistent as the average IsleTuber's upload schedule. And although the new update brought a bunch of super awesome content and necessary quality of life changes, it also brought a host of confusing and downright disappointing balance changes. Wait, did you guys hear something? Must have been the wind. Anyways,
Yo, what's up, guys? I just kind of like walked in here and found goldfish like that. That's kind of like crazy. I don't know what happened here, but I think he's okay. He sounds like he's gonna make a recovery. So yeah, today I'm gonna be, I guess, taking over Goldfish's place since he's kind of just laying down, taking a little nap. And today we are going to be talking about the current Isle balance situation. Oh, he's still alive. 1 second, guys. As I'm sure you guys are all aware, the current Isle balance is complete and utter garbage. When I ask people about their opinions on the current balance in my Discord and in IsleCord, I found that generally everyone agrees that the current balance is pretty terrible.
Holy Jesus!
But why is the balance so bad? Well, I can tell you that it all starts with this. Just a disclaimer before the video starts, this video is not a hit piece on Dondi trying to say that, oh, I just don't like him, so I'm gonna make this video. I actually do hold some respect for Dondi because of how he's treated me in the past and my personal interactions with him. But the balance, unfortunately, is bad, and he is the one who's in charge, so he's the one who is responsible for this balance, and I'm going to call out what is going on with the balance. So with that being said, let's get into my next point. Balance is an important part of any video game, whether it's a solo game or a multiplayer game, and in the Isle's case, balance has never been more important. In the current state of Isle balance, some creatures simply aren't even worth your time because there's better options. If the Isle had good balancing, creatures would have the opportunity to shine rather than selecting the new meta playables each patch. Basically what I'm saying is good balance equals good game. And with that out of the way, let's start talking about... Since the start of Dondi balance, there has been some rather divisive balance changes, to say the least. The first of which was the removal of sprinting alt attack. Now you may ask, what was the reasoning he made this change? Like, there had to be a good reason. Like, what was the issue? Basically, his reasoning for removing this was he didn't like how you could immediately turn around and pretty much stop on a dime. Instead of fixing the alt attack while sprinting to make it work and flow better, he just decides to completely remove it. And there wasn't really a single person that I could think of that really liked this change, besides Dondi. Now, I'm not going to get too far into why this was such a bad change, but the only thing that this change really accomplished was it lowered any dynamic gameplay with the combat. In simple terms, it just made the combat pretty boring, and it didn't really help anything. For example, Packy was able to use its running alt attack to catch Omnis that were too close to its radius. Like, if an Omni was like circling around the Packy was able to sprint over and then alt attack. There wasn't really a problem with this, no one really complained, but it was removed anyway. After this change, Packy suffered greatly because it couldn't sprint at Omni anymore, and it kind of just had to trot around and stay still. It couldn't really play too offensive, it just had to play strictly defensive. And on top of this, Ram was changed and they got rid of stun, without giving Packy anything else. But this will be talked about later in the video because I can honestly make an entire video on Packy. But this change was only the beginning. The reasoning for these stam changes was the devs didn't really like how Spearow felt like a PvP sandbox game, and they wanted their players to conserve their stam and play the game more carefully, which in my opinion is a fair enough reason for this change. But the way they implemented these changes and how the changes are currently is just unfun. These stam changes were supposed to make the game harder and make players play smarter, but all it really did was make the game a lot more tedious while not really fixing any of the issues that they wanted to fix. Dondi said that the purpose was to remove the cheeky min-max regens with people constantly moving and sitting. And for those of you that play the game, this kind of sounds like how the stam is right now. You want to make sure you're at 60% stam so you can regen while trotting, and if you go below, you make sure to sit and get your stam back. While I get the reasoning for this change, what is really the point of this change if it's still the exact same thing as Spearow, but worse? For example, Carno on Spearow had a run timer of 60 seconds, and on Gateway, Carno can now run for 160 seconds. However, if Carno wants to min-max their stam, they can run for 65 seconds to get down to 60% and then trot to regen their stam back. So why change the stam if all it did was just make the gameplay more tedious? On top of this, they made it so every creature can have infinite alt bites on 0 stam, which means if you're playing Stego and Dino, you don't really need to conserve your stam at all. They just made the 2 Apex playables that are already pretty easy to play when you're full grown even easier. These stam changes, in my opinion, were pretty unnecessary, and all it really did was make the game a lot more tedious. But I do think the idea to change the stam wasn't really bad. It was just very poorly executed. Now, let's jump to some more recent balance changes to see if anything got better.
They didn't get better.
Oh, hell no.
The Dibble change was honestly probably one of the worst changes that has been made in recent times, considering that when Dibble was first introduced, it was at 1 tons and it was rightfully buffed to 2 tons, and out of nowhere, Dondi says, you know what, this thing should be 3 tons. And now we have a 3-ton Stego 2.0 Dibble that is pretty much unkillable unless this thing is in groups. And frankly, there was really no reason for this. Like, they could have waited till Aloe was in the game, then maybe buffed it to 3 tons if that was the reason for it. And if that wasn't the reason for this change, then it was still, like, really pointless. Like, it feels like they just put this change in because I don't even know. I still can't even explain why this change was really made. Pretty much, this change made it where Dibble was, practically unkillable unless it was alone, a terrible player, or if you were in a really big group of Ceratos, Tennos, Omnis, or Dilos. And as you all know, Dibble players are almost never alone, so trying to find and kill Dibbles can be pretty difficult. Not only that, that's not really the biggest problem. The fact that this change didn't really feel like it was made for any balancing reasons, and again, if they made this change for Aloe, why not just buff it when Aloe is introduced? It really doesn't make sense for this change to even be a thing. Another thing that I want to talk about is Packy has been completely left behind in the current state of the game. This thing has almost nothing. It gets pinned by Omnis fairly easily with 2 Omnis just pinning it. It gets slowed down when an Omni pounces on it, so another Omni can easily pounce and pin it. Its ram is super buggy. Every time you ram something, you take damage, which is just not fun. Whenever you miss a ram, you get like staggered, or it's like a miss animation. But Omni's animation was completely removed. Meanwhile, Packy still has it for some reason. If you're gonna remove it from Omni, at least remove it from Packy, in my opinion. And yeah, just Packy being completely left behind is just, I feel like it's pretty lazy. I'm a Packy lover, and I think that thing is probably one of the most fun playables in the game, and it has not been touched for a year, and it's complete garbage as it is currently. It is riddled with bugs, terrible stats, and it is just pretty unfun to play for the most part. There's also been a series of shadow nerfs that have went on to Tenno. At first, on Spearow, Tenno's tail slam damage was 250. At the start of Dondi's balance. Then when Cerato was launched, it was nerfed down to 150, and in the most recent patch for the game, the Tenno Tail Slam got nerfed from 150 down to 100, and the Tenno Kick was nerfed from 275 down to 250. Meanwhile, Cerato's charge damage has been completely untouched, and its charge damage is at 345, which I don't see too big of an issue with the 345 damage, but nerfing Tenno's Tail Slam attack damage that low is just kind of dumb, while Cerato's charge damage is completely untouched.
Hamburger.
Now, I just want to keep this part short on Cerato. I'm pretty sure we all know that Cerato is kind of ridiculous right now with its insta-puking and all this stuff, but They turned a scavenger Ceratosaurus into a apex predator as it is currently. I mean, once Aloe's in the game, then that thing is just going to completely obliterate Cerato, and then you're probably barely going to see Ceratos. But the only thing that I am seeing when I'm currently playing this game, and this is like in the Horde test now, is Ceratos, because this thing is just way too good. And I can go in more in depth on why it's so bad and the balancing decisions that they made to make it, you know, even more cancerous. But I will say that they did... I did like the idea that they had for making it puke smaller creatures. It's just, you know, puking Dibble in like 1 to 2 hits and Carno in 1 bite is ridiculous, and that should not be a thing. Carno has been a tricky playable to balance for the most part in the history of Evrima. It has been constantly getting buffs and nerfs and buffs and nerfs, and the most recent change to Carno was a fat nerf. This thing is very weak to bleed now. It has a very weak bite force, it has a very weak charge, and pretty much when it was first introduced with these new changes, it was only really good because of the bugs that it had, which was Omnis couldn't really pounce it when it was ramming. It could, you know, knock down things that were really close to it with like a spam charge, stuff like that. And now, as those bugs are being removed from the game, we're kind of starting to see how this thing really is. And we are starting to see that this thing is pretty garbage. It can't really hunt the small game that it's supposed to. Turkish said this beautifully.
That if it sees 2 raptors, it needs to be careful, otherwise it fucking dies. If it sees 2 galleys, it needs to be careful, otherwise it fucking dies. If it sees 2 dilos, it fucking dies.
So basically, if Carno tries to hunt pretty much anything that is in a pair or that isn't alone, it fucking dies. That's very short, not really explaining it too much. If you want to listen to a more detailed, in-depth video on Carno's current state, I recommend watching Turkish's video because I have some more points that I want to get to, starting with Dondi's balancing decisions. Dondi's balancing decisions haven't really felt like they were for the sake of balancing the game, and it doesn't feel like he takes the role of balance as serious as he should. For example, when Hypno was in charge of balance, we got very detailed patch notes saying what changed in the balance, whereas Dondi didn't say anything about balance in the patch notes at all. Another point that I just want to bring up very quickly is a lot of these balance changes that are implemented into the game don't feel like they were balance tested in the slightest. Cerato's bile buff, insta-puking Carno's, pretty much 1 to 2 shotting puke on a Dibble, almost insta-puking Tenno is just ridiculous. This should not have ever been a thing, and I know a lot of people like to blame QA for this, but I would like to say that this is definitely not QA's fault. I doubt that they saw this and said, yeah, this is fine, let's put this in the game. And speaking with some of the QA members just about their opinions on the game and just like what they hope to see within the balance, they have really good takes, and I doubt that they were seeing this happen and go like, yep, that's fine. Now, what can be done about this balance? Well, I have 2 solutions. The first solution is that Dondi takes his balancing role more seriously, and he starts understanding the game more and learning how players actually play the game, and then making those decisions more for the players rather than something that is either personal or for a realistic change with no realism behind it. I also think if Dondi is able to share how the future balance should look for the game, it'll provide QA with a lot more detail in how they should go about their balance suggestions, and I think that with this, the QA would be able to make better balance decisions or balance suggestions based on what Dondi wants for the current or the future balance of the game. And I also think that Dondi, as head of balance, it should be trying to get out balance patches at least once every month or once every 2 months at the minimum. The next solution I'd say is to give us modding, because if you give the players modding and we can change the stats just like Pot, you'll have really good community servers, and this game's balance doesn't have to fall into the hands of the devs that just kind of like, by the devs I honestly just mean Dondi, like just flip-flopping, just making shit, like it just feels like he just makes random balance decisions just like spontaneously. They don't really feel like they're for the sake of balance, but with modding, players can actually balance the game the way that they want to play the game, and it makes the game a lot more engaging for those players, and it also helps community servers. And going on to this note, if you guys would like to play an awesome community server that hopefully whenever modding is the thing will be the best balanced server in the Isle. Join the Voids Oasis Discord server. Shameless plug, yes I know, but if you guys want to play on a really good NA server that eventually will have amazing balance, be sure to join that in the link in the description and the pinned comment. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have. Let me know if I missed anything in this. There's a lot that went into this, like rescripting and, you know, doing all that stuff. There's so many other points that I can still talk about that I just didn't really feel like were too important for this video to really, you know, put it in, because I feel like it would just be a jumbled mess. But yeah, that's pretty much all for today, and yeah, I'll see you guys later. Peace!